Yes.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to our 2020 pandemic edition of Exploring Emory Economics, a virtual information session where you will learn all about our wonderful economics department programs. I'd like to start by thanking my wonderful colleagues who will be making presentations, Professor Carbonik, Chris Carbonik, Kaiji Chen, Ian McCarthy, Keith Robinson, David Jesho Chavez, and the always debonair Melvin Iogu. You can recognize him, or you will be able to recognize him in the Nelson Mandela shirt. I also want to extend a very special thanks to Katie Zhang, who is on the executive board of the Emory Economic Student Society, and she will be making a presentation as well. And my biggest thank you is to our extraordinary undergraduate program coordinator, interim, and senior program coordinator, Elizabeth Eichinger, for organizing all of this for us. So I'd like to kick things off by taking a few minutes to talk about why you should consider majoring in economics, including career and salary information. So why major in economics? Well, Mick Jagger and Arnold Schwarzenegger both majored in economics, and look how they turned out. And if you ever find yourself in an unemployment line, then by God, if you're an economics major, you will know why you're there. Speaking of which, economics is a great major because it offers a plethora of career and job opportunities. So economics is actually a great major if you're anything like I was when I was in college. You're not entirely sure what career you want to pursue. Why? Because it leaves doors open for careers in a very wide range of fields. An economics major is ideal preparation for continuing education in economics, law, business, finance, public policy, public health. Many courses in leading law schools make extensive use of economic analysis. The average score of econ majors on the LSAT, the law school admission test, is always in the top few compared to all other majors in the college. Several of our graduates have been admitted to the top law schools in the country, including Harvard. Econ is ideal preparation if you're interested in a graduate business degree. Top graduate business programs tend to favor economics students with econ degrees over students with BBAs, because in economics, you learn tools for theoretical and empirical analysis that you can apply to a broad range of cases. And in the business school, you study particular cases. So in the case-based discussions in graduate business school programs, you kind of have more to bring to the table if you have a background in economics. And you can always choose an economics and BBA double major. That would give you an edge on either the business or academic market over all those who have only a BBA. As an economics major, you can pursue graduate education towards a PhD in economics or finance. Most public policy issues have a strong economic dimension to them. So economics is a natural choice. If you're interested in graduate education, public policy, public administration, or public health, economics majors can work as health policy analysts at policy institutes and government health agencies, including the CDC that's on our campus or near our campus, as competition policy analysts at the FTC or DOJ, as monetary policy analysts at any one of the many Federal Reserve banks, including the one here in Atlanta. Graduate education in the form of law degrees, masters of public health, MBAs, and so on are a great investment. Those few extra years of education will pay off for your entire lifetime. With advances in medical technology, many of you could conceivably live to well beyond 100 years old. New treatments and prevention programs for heart disease, diabetes, cancer, they may extend your life for several years. And in those extra years of life, other treatments may be discovered that extend your lives even further. So your life expectancy could grow exponentially. And so the cost of a few extra years of education are likely completely trumped by the long-term benefits. Of course, economics is a great choice if you're interested in a career in business too. Economics teaches tools for strategic thinking and empirical analysis that can help make you a successful entrepreneur. One of our majors, Kaya Majumdar, a few years ago was on my favorite TV show, Shark Tank, where she earned a $50,000 investment in exchange for 40% of her company, which was called BZBox from Mr. Wonderful. And her company made sturdy but collapsible packing boxes, and she did this when she was moving her stuff into the dorms here at Emory. In addition, economics majors are sought after in private sector jobs right out of college and consulting companies. In tech companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, in fact, hired as one of our faculty last year, the chief economist of Amazon, Stefan Hoderlein. And so you can take classes from him. The banking industry, real estate companies, investment banks, insurance companies, law firms, even sports teams. Many of you might have seen the movie Moneyball, many other areas. I'm very excited that my wonderful colleague Keith Robinson is going to talk all about consulting opportunities. Now, if we could go back to the next slide, Elizabeth. Yeah, number 4, perfect. Now, one thing that you may be interested in knowing when choosing among majors is what the salaries are like for different majors. So a company called PayScale provides rankings of college majors by salary. And here you have one of the recent rankings. And according to it, the median, so we're at number 7 here, the median starting and mid-career salaries for economics and math majors are $60,000 and $122,900 respectively, which are higher than the median starting and mid-career salaries for all other majors except for engineering and actuarial math and science. If we could go to the next slide, Elizabeth. It's also of interest that the median lifetime earnings of economics majors, which you can see down below, it's the penultimate bar in this graph. There we go. Is nearly $3.5 million, even a little higher than that. And it's higher than, it's higher than for all other majors except for engineering. And it's possible that majors like economics, mathematics, engineering, they're simply attracting the better students, or they have greater earnings potential for any given student, or some combination of the two. But the data do suggest good initial earnings potential and great growth, earnings growth potential for economics majors. Now, I don't mean to say that you shouldn't try to find a field in which you have a comparative advantage and major in that. I mean, you can tell from this graph that, for example, if you're in the 90th percentile in philosophy, the 4th bar in this chart, then you're going to make more on average. You might make more on average in economics, or at the medium than you would if you were average in economics. 90th percentile in philosophy does better than 50th percentile in economics. So then you should, if you cared about your earnings, think about majoring in philosophy instead. But it's still interesting to see that the average in economics is higher than it is in most other fields. Now, we have some information from our survey of the 2019 economics graduates on this next slide. And you can see that the average base salary for our class of 2019 economics major graduates was nearly $70,000 with a maximum disclosed of $100,000. The pie chart's interesting too. You can see the fields in which our graduates got jobs. You can see that consulting is a big piece of that pie. And Keith will talk about, my colleague Keith Robinson will talk about opportunities in consulting, business development, finance, research, advertising, media, and PR, also big parts of this pie chart. Other information that we know about our 2019 senior graduates is that the average number of internships per student was 2.2. The average number of interviews per student that they got was 3.3. And the average number of job offers per student was approximately 2. So our students do quite well. And of course, there are all the continuing education opportunities. On the next slide, I think we have, yes, all the continuing education fields. We have placements in the really top schools you know, UPenn, Johns Hopkins, Yale, NYU, Texas, Austin, Cambridge, University of Chicago, Columbia, Duke, Northwestern. So lots of placements in really top graduate programs. You can see what fields those graduate programs that are 2019 graduates placed into. You can see many in public health, economics, engineering, actuarial science, law, finance, and a wealth of other fields. Now, what are the requirements then for an economics major, now that you know that you can do so well if you were to major in this field? Well, we have many options that you can pursue if you choose economics as one of your major, or just to be taking courses in the economics department. Of course, you can do a straight economics major, and that consists of 1 math course, 6 foundation courses, and 4 electives. 2 of the 4 electives have to be at the 400 level, and no more than 1 can be at the 200 level. We also offer an economics. And I'd like to note that, you know, you're contemplating choices between majors at this point. Another choice that you have is to major QSS, quantitative social sciences. And within QSS, you can choose a track, and you could conceivably choose the economics track with a QSS major. But I just want to let you know that the economics track within the QSS major consists of a minor in economics, and not more than a minor in economics. We also have very popular and very successful joint program, joint majors in economics and mathematics. That's a long-standing one with our graduates doing really well on the job market and getting into very top graduate programs. And a new joint major in economics and human health that has just started, which I'm very excited about. We already have quite a few students signing up. It started basically this fall. And you can find out the requirements for all of these majors on our website. You can also get a lot more information about the placement of all of our graduates from our website. If you could just Google Emory Economics and you click on the undergraduate tab and say you were interested, what are the requirements for the economics and human health joint major, then you would click on major minor courses, and then you would get a description of all the requirements and a PDF checklist for all of the courses. Now within the economics major, last thing I'd like to talk about is we have elective areas of specialization. You can specialize in law and economics, international development economics, business policy, public policy, behavioral economics, health economics, macroeconomics, and monetary economics, financial economics, and even in quantitative methods and data analysis. And we have these concentrations are very strong. For example, we have very strong concentration in financial economics. We take courses like Introduction to Stocks, Bonds, and Financial Markets, a financial economics course, a financial econometrics course, a course in advanced markets and instruments. We're very strong in macroeconomics and monetary economics, of course, with our partners at the Atlanta Fed, very strong in health economics with our partners at Rollins and the CDC. These specializations, they're meant as a guide for you to choose your electives within a major program. You don't have to take your electives to satisfy one of these specializations or concentrations, but it's something that if you do, you can put on your resume. You know, I have a specialization in financial economics, for example. And I think this is a good time to pass it off to my colleague, Chris Carbonik, who will talk a little bit about the specialization in public policy. Chris, the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much, Hugo. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Can we screen me to slide 11? Awesome. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about public policy and economics, and you know, the fact that economics is actually more than just money. It's actually mostly not about money, even though Hugo, you know, highlighted things like financial economics and macro. But a lot of the things we do as economists are actually not related to financial markets, to stock market, to macroeconomy. And you know, economists are uniquely suited to solving also micro problems. And if you effectively can solve a lot of micro problems, this aggregates up to really potentially large gains in the economy as a whole. Economics is, you also need to remember that economics is just more than equations and math. So yes, you need mathematics. This is extremely important. But econ is not about math. It's not. There is a reason why we have economics and why we have mathematics and why we have sociology, right? So economics is somewhere in the middle where we use these quantitative skills to solve problems, to answer important questions. And so economics is much more a way of thinking and tools that we use in our thinking processes to solve real life problems in both business and in policy and in various areas of the policy, in particular in public policy. So if you're scared of math, or if you're not feeling that comfortable with math, this is not sufficient in my view to give up, thinking about econ degree. You're going to have to potentially suffer through a little bit of math, but again, econ is not math, and especially if you're thinking about econ and human health, there is less math there than, for instance, in econ and mathematics major. Can we go to the next slide, Alice? Yeah, awesome. So again, economics is more about people, their choices, and the production processes that are, consequences of these choices. And for that, you don't have to limit yourself to money or financial markets. So you can study things. So I, for instance, study issues related to prenatal development and childhood health and how this affects the economy. And it's economics too, right? It's a production function. How you do early in life matters for your productivity, for your ability to go to Emory, and ultimately for your earnings and for your labor market productivity. So we as economists study everything from prenatal health and genetics through schooling, through healthcare, to the labor market and, anti-poverty programs, unemployment insurance. So these are all, areas of interest for public policy that are not necessarily related to what you would traditionally think as economics. But the core sort of combination that we always use is that we combine theory, data, and then statistical methods. And that's the unique skill set that you're really getting from being an economist, right? So if you want to be a pure theories, and focus on mathematics, do mathematics. If you want to be a data person, do computer science. If you want to do pure statistics, be a statistician. If you want to do more qualitative work, be a sociologist. If you want to encompass all of those areas together, then you should be an economist, because that's exactly what we do. And can we go to the last slide, Liz? Thanks. So yeah, so because we're doing such a vast variety of things, we're hired by a myriad of institutions, from private corporations and governments to international organizations, NGOs, to places like cities, hospitals, school districts, who also need economists to provide them with credible analysis. So why do we have so much influence in these organizations, and why would something like a school district hire us? Again, it's this unique ability to combine economic theory with data to arrive at credible, quantifiable answers to the questions that a business, a school district, or a government could have. And again, the uniqueness of econ is really that we tend to think about what is and what will be rather than what should be. So our objectivity is a value for these institutions, as well as we tend to think very rigorously why something happens. So econ is really often about why certain processes occur. So we call these mechanisms. And once you understand this, you can generalize it or replicate it. And that has a huge value to any kind of government, NGO, city official, or a manager in a private company. All right, so that's it for me. if you have any questions, I will be available to answer them afterwards, I think.
All right, so I'd like to spend the next couple of minutes to talk about macroeconomics. And so Hugo and Chris already mentioned about economics in general and economics policy. Okay, so basically I'm going to focus on what does macroeconomics do, and how does the macroeconomics can help your career. Okay, so basically macroeconomics is about understanding why economy's GDP, unemployment, consumption, and savings, labor supply, etc., grow over time. So that's more of a long term, right? Or fluctuate over a business cycle. So that's a more short term. And not only that, the economics try to explain those kind of phenomena, but also it tries to understand how macro policy, work in reality. For example, there's a monetary policy, fiscal policy, and trade policy. Okay, so I give a kind of incomplete manual of a macroeconomics and what are the macro policy. Can you go to the next slide? So on the left, a bar, you can see that the macro cover the following issue. First, it's economic growth, business cycles, financial crisis, for example, stock market crisis, banking crisis, and housing boom or bust, right? We know that's a very important topics over the last 10 years. And income inequality, why the income inequality rise, for the past 30 or 40 years in the developed world. And the wage premium as well, also in terms of international macro. So we are interested in the capital flow, okay? Capital inflow and outflow. And associated with that is a sovereign default, okay? And finally, we are interested in the trade balance. So corresponding to those kind of phenomena, you can see that there are monetary policy, for example, the open market operation, or quantitative easing, and fiscal policy, for example, the government spending policy or tax policy. So these are policy very much related to both the economic growth and the business cycle. And also you have a regulatory policy, right? And for example, regulation on banking or shadow banking. So these are very much related to the financial crisis. Housing policy, for example, down payment requirement, and a redistributive policy, for example, Obamacare, public pension policy, right? And finally, we have a labor market policy, for example, the minimum wage law, and the capital control or trade policy. Okay? So these are a kind of incomplete list of what a macroeconomics do. Then next slide. So why knowing about these topics will be relevant for your future career? So here, that I just mentioned several type of job that need knowledge about macroeconomics. For example, if you're interested in consulting firm, right? You want to go to BCG or Boston Consulting, or financial institution, you want to go to Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, right? So these kind of institutions, they have the research department, and which does request the forecasting about the future macro. For example, after the president election, what's going to be the future fiscal policy, right? So this kind of knowledge is something that this consulting for financial institutions they need. Second, of course, if you are interested in the government institution, for example, the Federal Reserve Bank, we have Atlanta Fed in Atlanta, or if you want to go to the World Bank or IMF, okay, definitely they need a macroeconomics. And if you're interested in those kind of economic or financial media, for example, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, The Economist, definitely they need the knowledge about macroeconomics. And if you want to go to the think tank, for example, the Brookings Institute, they need knowledge about macroeconomics. So you can see that for different type of job, the knowledge about macroeconomics is very helpful. Okay, at the next slide. So in terms of macroeconomic research, so nowadays, what kind of question the macroeconomists are thinking or working on these days? I should say that the macro is very much an applied, economy, and it's interested in the different kind of topical issue. For example, go to the next slide. So, we know that there's a pandemic, okay, it's ongoing. So how does the pandemic affect unemployment in the US? So, some, economists, they show in the data that, according to the different wage level, here you have a quintile 1, which is the bottom wage quintile, quintile 2, 3, 4. You can see that during the pandemic, different wage quintile actually suffer differently, okay, in terms of unemployment. And especially those lower, wage quintile, they suffer the unemployment more. Okay, so that's one important issue. Okay, the next slide. So another issue, if you are interested in the open economy, we all know that there's a trade war in the 2018. How does the trade war raise the cost of import for the U.S. consumer? So another group of macroeconomists, so they show that during the 2018, there are 6 waves of trade war. For each wave, the goods that are affected by the trade war, their price unanimously increase. Okay, so you can see that this is a starting point of the each wave of the trade war, and you can see that the price of those affected goods increased by 5% to 25%. Okay, at the next slide. And another policy is about stimulus policy, right? We know that there was a stimulus check during the pandemic. It's under the policy of Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Security Act. The interesting question is how the people, spend the stimulus check. Okay, so in this chart, we do show that when people get a stimulus check, they spend about 42% of the stimulus check on spending, consumption, but they save another 31%. Okay, into their own saving. Okay, so here is about 30%, 27%, and they also spend 31% of the stimulus check in payback of mortgage. So this gives us a hint that on the effectiveness of the stimulus check, right? So on the one hand, it does increase the household disposable income. On the other hand, it's not that effective in stimulating consumption. Okay, so to just summarize, you can see that the macroeconomics is very much related to our daily life. Okay, and it not only help us for our future career, and no matter what kind of job you want to do, okay, think tank, okay, or consulting firm, or private firms or government institutions, but also in terms of research, I think that's very related to our the current economic event. Yeah, so I'm going to pass on to the Ian McCarthy.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for staying on and for tuning in tonight. I think I have some animations, so I'm going to transition here and share my slide, share my screen, and hopefully those animations will show up here. All right. So we've mentioned a couple times health economics is kind of a focus, or one of a handful of focuses that we have here in the Emory Economics Department. And what I want to do tonight is highlight a few areas where I think, a few reasons why I think health economics is a particularly interesting area of study. And I want to do that with a few points. One, I want to highlight how important and interrelated health and economics are. And the other I want to do is talk about how unique the US healthcare system is. And then finally, I want to talk about kind of how those unique aspects and really how the relationship between economics and health in general lend it to be its own field of unique interest among economists. So the first point I want to make here is just how related economics and health are. So as many of you are probably aware, we've made huge advances in the past 60, 70, 80 years in terms of our health, really, no matter how you measure it across the world. This is a graph just showing you kind of our life expectancy over time, which is pretty incredible. Just stepping back from any kind of econ major information or anything like that. The idea that we less than 70 years ago had an average life expectancy, a median life expectancy across the world of 45 years and now we're up over 70. That's pretty crazy. But this is just to show you that we are getting healthier as a population on the planet. And one reason for that, of course, there are dozens and dozens, but one important reason is that we are getting wealthier. And this is kind of a relationship between life expectancy and GDP. Is a kind of a crude measure of showing you that, hey, there is some relationship between countries that are wealthier and presumably using that wealth to improve their health. Right. And of course, healthcare is a part of that, but not the only part. We have public health measures. We have some very basic minimum standards that people have to have that you can't really reach unless you have a certain level of wealth, you know, starvation and housing, very simple things that we need that a little bit more wealth can really help provide. But nonetheless, the relationship is still there. Now, that's great, but the US is a little unique. And what I'm showing you here is a plot of GDP growth over time, and the highlighted dot there is the US against other OECD countries. And we're looking at GDP growth across life expectancy, or relationship between GDP growth and life expectancy over time. And you can see that as time has gone by, we have dramatically increased in GDP per capita, but we've kind of flattened out in terms of our life expectancy. And in fact, over the past few years, among some populations in the US, it's been the first time in many, many decades where we've had a reduction in life expectancy on average. So the US, despite getting richer and richer and richer every year, in terms of our health improvement, we're actually not doing that great. This is another way of looking at that. There's no health information here, but it's just showing you that instead of just looking at GDP, let's look at our spending as a share of GDP. Again, just highlighting how much of an outlier the US is. And then finally, I want to highlight this point again and talk about healthcare's percentage of GDP and a pretty common health outcome measure, which in this case is maternal mortality. So again, the idea here is that as we spend more on healthcare, we improve in maternal mortality. And that is generally true on average, although you see the US again becoming this outlier, continuing to spend more and more and more on our healthcare, but not getting necessarily a big output from it in terms of health. All right, so the economics and health are heavily related. And the US is a little unique. We have this growing expenditure, growing GDP, but not necessarily a big improvement in health, and in fact, in some ways, a reduction in health relative to other countries. I think that's in itself a reason to think about healthcare in the U.S., but in the world in general. Another thing that's kind of particularly important about healthcare, I think very recently that's kind of a point that highlights how important health and economics are, is how awful this year has been for so many of us and for so many people around the world. It very clearly shows how related and interconnected policy, healthcare, and economics are. I mean, we can't have a functioning economy if we don't have, some minimum level of health. These things are kind of just, they almost go hand in hand, at least at some point. And that's been revealed pretty easily this year. Now, what are some kind of particularly interesting economics issues underlying health? There are several, and in some countries, these are more prevalent than in others. The US is kind of unique in that all of these play an important role, and I think that's why a lot of interesting economic healthcare research is done in the US, although certainly not only in the US. So we have these several reasons here listed. One is that healthcare is a very heterogeneous product. If you think about buying, a hip replacement, for example, in one hospital versus another, the quality of that may be very different. The price of that may be very different. So we have these, even for similar goods, we have huge heterogeneities across suppliers. We have very asymmetric information between patients and physicians. So we know physicians kind of are much better informed than most patients. and they may have their own financial incentives for pursuing certain strategies, and that can influence the types of treatment patients ultimately receive or where they receive it, without us necessarily knowing it as patients. There's unobservable quality. This is kind of like an experience good, where you don't know the quality of healthcare you're really going to get until afterward. You don't know even when you need healthcare often until the last minute, right? Especially for a lot of conditions where you end up in the emergency department or some kind of major health event. Those are things that are largely unexpected or unpredictable. We have this kind of financial distortion in terms of incentives that we face when we purchase healthcare. To the extent we're insured, it may be a $10,000 procedure that we're considering, but we may only pay $500 of it or $1,000 of it, which of course can still feel like a lot of money, but it's certainly not the full amount. So there's this distortionary effect of having insurance. And then finally, we talked about asymmetric information between patients and physicians. There's also asymmetric information between people and the insurers. So I know more about my health than an insurance firm can predict, and therefore I might make decisions about which plan to select in a way that maybe the insurer wouldn't prefer, or if had they known, they may have priced the product a little bit differently. So like I mentioned, all of these things exist independently in different markets, but really I would be hard pressed to find a market where all of them exist together other than healthcare. And that's one thing that I think makes healthcare a really, really interesting thing to study. And the last thing I'll mention is kind of an outcome of all of those issues in US healthcare is reflected in these graphs, and they're difficult to see. I wanted to put them all side by side, but the idea is that this is all looking at a single market, and we're looking at actual prices paid for different goods. So we have a knee replacement here, a hip replacement here, and then on the far right is this lower limb MRI, which the reason I put that up there is to think of it as like a purely homogeneous, something where no matter where you go, you're getting the same product. But because all these issues play a role, asymmetric information, unobservable quality, all of those things I mentioned before, we see huge information, even for an identical product in the same market. So this, just looking at this right graph, you see places charging over $2,000. I shouldn't say charge in healthcare. This really is a negotiated price. $2,000 to as little as like $500. So we see 3 or 4 times more difference between the highest and the lowest price product for what is really an identical product. And this pricing problem is kind of a major source, if not the biggest source of our excess spending in the US. And it's something that most healthcare economists are interested in some way or another. Obviously, we haven't solved this problem yet, but that's why we need more of you guys to choose Econ, to really commit to studying these topics so that we can help improve the efficiency of healthcare delivery and improve quality, not only across the world, but particularly in the US, where we have this real efficiency issue. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. That was quite illuminating. I may pick up where you left off, actually, as we talk about consulting, and you can just run it to the next slide, Elizabeth. That's fine. I'm Keith Robinson. While my day job, I guess, is I'm a partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers, the professional services firm here in Atlanta. I have the pleasure, however, of being a visiting faculty member at Emory, teaching a special topics class in the fall, at least right now, as well as doing some independent studies with some of the students. But I wanted to spend a few minutes and talk about really, the idea of consulting. And while I work, for a professional services firm, right, in a sense, a private consulting firm that is doing research and analysis for our multinational company clients, right? The generic term consulting, right, is a wide variety of things, and then picking up kind of maybe where Ian left off, and when we looked at the graph with 3 different sets of prices for 3 different things, I think there would be plenty of room for, right, as a large company, for example, who goes out looking for insurance as a benefit for its employees, is certainly interested in the prices that its employees has to pay, in a sense, in a cost benefit analysis. They need people to do those analyses. Those are typically not the companies themselves. That would be their advisors or their consultants who would do that. So I see a lot of room, just in the last slide Ian had for consulting for a company, for, if you will, the U.S. government or the state government, who are quite often responsible for picking up the tab. He used hip and knee replacements, right? These are generally not items of I guess healthcare consumption that are undertaken by relatively young people. So these could be people on Medicare or Medicaid. So the government is generally funding a lot of the bill on that. But of course, private insurers do as well. So you would have a wide variety of kind of researching the interests in that area, analyzing the data, and of course, I believe those companies would look for economists really to fill the gap on that. As someone who does consulting for a living, I can tell you that we would use health economists for that at PwC, where I work. But again, whether the consulting is in a sense in a private setting, or in a sense in a public setting for a company that does consulting primarily for state and local governments or international governments. There's also consultants who you would say would be NGOs, right? Non-governmental organizations, development agencies, et cetera. The whole package, generally, the background of those people is, to be honest, that I've always dealt with is from an economics variety. And that's not just, for example, I have a PhD in economics, but that's certainly not I'll call it entry-level degree at any firm. For consultants, it's a wide field, open to all backgrounds, really, and all types of degrees. But I will say, at least in our firm, in the field, in the sector that I'm in within PwC, which is transfer pricing, is strictly economics and finance oriented, and we pretty much only hire economics or finance people. And I don't mean business school necessarily people. Our preferred hire would be, an economics graduate, actually, because of the writing skills that go along with it. And so I want to tell you, in the world of consulting, your advice, I'll say, really is only as good as your ability to effectively communicate what you're trying to say, to, in a sense, your client. But quite often your client has hired you for a point of view in some other kind of initiative that they have. Like if it's within health economics, they may have certain policy angles or certain funds they're attempting to get from government agencies, or if you will, just from other private sources of funding. And the ability to effectively communicate the logic and the ideas of what you're trying to do goes a long way, right? It's the message does matter, and how you deliver the message really matters. A series of exciting quantitative and analytical, charts, slides, visualizations, etc., is often compelling, but not if it doesn't have the right words with it to convey the meaning and get the point across. And the other end of the person reading it is always a person, right? It's not a robot. So just make sure of that as you think about the next few years that you have at Emory, and you have obviously have choices in your majors. I think the university puts out. I have the luxury of, I guess, seeing some of the output of the university and the people that we hire into our firm. We've probably hired, at least in our office alone, 10 probably economics graduates from Emory, either BA, BS economics, joint majors, with the business school sometimes, econ math, econ something else, or even someone from the PhD program at Emory as well in our office. And the main criteria that we're after is the broad ranging, I'll say, liberal arts degree that the university offers. And I think it's, if you're choosing, you might like economics, but maybe you think, the business school or something, I don't know, they got the flashy brochure maybe or something. And it's something that looks good. I'll say, right, there's looks and then there's the communication of it. So as I'm looking for my degree opportunities, I should look on the back end as to what I think I might want to do. And when you're looking at that, just the breadth of offerings and the wide range of things you can do with an economics degree, whether that's in the consulting environment or whether that's just in life, kind of when Hugo talked at the beginning, I think is something that you want to seriously consider. The university provides an unbelievably high quality level of education from the faculty that's there. The university and the department has put together a top-notch faculty that will spend the time with you, help you understand what it is you're after and some of the job potentials that could be there. As someone who's fortunate enough, I'll say, to come and engage with the students, I'm always happy to talk about the consulting environments and assist people in trying to break into the field, whether that field is in consulting or whether that's attempting to go to graduate school, and for letters of recommendation. I've already written a couple this fall myself for some of the students in my class. So I'd ask you to just think about that as you build kind of the future of learning that you're going to undertake, not just in your time at Emory, but that'll continue on for a lifetime. And an economics degree, I think, opens the world of just learning, I think, as well, because it has so many facets that reach into pretty much every day in life, right? I mean, microeconomics, right? It's the study of households and household behavior, or macroeconomics, right? The broader kind of economic tendencies that vary country to country. I think that's everything, right? Micro and macro. Put it all together, it's the entire world. It's everything that happens in the world. It's not all just about business and money. I mean, the consulting that I happen to do does have to do with multinational companies and their kind of economic and financial analyses for the inner workings of that company as they kind of buy and sell things, goods and services and intangibles to themselves effectively. But it's also a large part of international trade. So it comes into a wide variety of policy implications as well. So I think this is something, as you're, pondering, as you're sitting in the remote environment we currently live in, that this could be something that I think you would enjoy, not just now, but I think you would enjoy it into the future. Perhaps, you think you might, I might want to go to law school, or I might not want to go. If you don't know, I say, don't worry about it. Major in economics, and then you'll have a wide number of job opportunities should you decide you don't want to do that. If you do want to go to law school, then I think you have one of the best, kind of backgrounds you could want to have for that. If you think you might want to, a different degree down the road, I'll say you want to work for 3 or 4 years, then I might suggest that you parlay your economics degree, into some sort of outside consulting job with a company, and then take that work experience, right, and that interactivity amongst people in your economics background to solve the problems while you're at the company, and then you'll see there's a large number of things available for you to do, in a public policy, master's in finance, master's PhD in economics, or any of these fields. But with a nice work experience, I think that one, will give you I think a better foundation perhaps for certain kinds of policy-oriented graduate schools, but also could be, depending on where you're working, the ability to actually have your employer, fund your graduate education, which I think is always a good thing. Certainly, as a parent, I know that's a good thing, but I'm sure your parents would appreciate that as well, that someone else might be paying for you to go to school. So with that, we'll turn it over to David to have some empirical and graduate school discussions.
Thank you very much, Keith. Good evening, everyone. I am Professor David Jaco Chavez here in the Economics Department at Emory University. And what I'm going to be talking about right now is about empirical training that our department provides. This is very relevant in these days. I'm also going to be talking about graduate school advising towards the end of my short presentation. So can you go to the next slide, please, Elizabeth? Okay. So far, you guys have seen a lot of charts, a lot of bar plots, a lot of scatter plots. You have seen a lot of data, basically, and that is partly the kind of training that you're going to be receiving if you were to major in economics. Because data needs to be collected, needs to be cleaned, needs to be analyzed. And as economists, you will learn these skills as part of your training. And that's quite unique about economics among the social sciences, evidence-based training. So something that you can see in this slide is something that we would like to advertise, is the fact that starting this fall, all our empirical training in our major have moved to Python. If you are thinking about majoring in economics, you will have to take two classes. One of them is Econ 220, which is statistics, and Econ 320, which is econometrics. And both of them have a lab component, which means that lab component has moved now to Python, which means that every major in economics will know how to do data analysis in Python. And that's actually a very useful skill. Why? Because if you were to look into what has become the most popular programming language in the world, you will see there is a lot of evidence that since 2 years ago, Python has overtaken Java as the most widely used programming language. So here in the Emory, the computer science department still uses Java. Other departments in political science, QSS, sociology, they use R. We used to do that. Now we don't. We're using Python. And in that regards, our department is a pioneer here at Emory. I just want to bring your attention to that. So, and what I'm also thinking is that if you're thinking about a career in economics and you know this skill, what is going to open up is opportunities for you to compete and potentially apply for data scientist jobs. Okay, with the added advantage to understand causality and perform statistical inference. So having said that, if you have taken or currently taking 320, I just want to bring your attention to some of our elective classes that are going to be offered next semester, like economic forecasting, okay, which is goes hand in hand with macroeconomics or financial econometrics, as you can imagine, go hand in hand with finance. And also this course called Advanced Topics in Econometrics, which is about empirical methods and machine learning. These are courses that are regularly offering our department. So, and as it was mentioned before, there's going to be a concentration you can potentially choose moving forward called the quantitative methods and data analysis concentration. So, do you mind going to the next slide, please? Okay, yes, thank you. So now, having said that, basically you want to talk a little bit about what kind of support does the department provide for those of you who are thinking potentially about going to grad school. Okay, that's an important step. As you can see, a lot of people in this room who have been talking, well, not a lot, all of us have a PhD in economics, and that's a decision we made earlier on in our training. So if you are at this point in your career that you think, you know, grad school might be something that I'm interested in economics, okay, is important that you start planning right now. And something that I always mention is that when you're in Econ math major is a good starting point, as well with our quantitative and methods and data analysis concentration, okay? And more importantly, if you're thinking about going to grad school, contact me. Okay, that's my email. Okay, then let's meet and let's chat about, you know, about it, about your decision, and learn more about what it takes to get into the grad school of your dreams if that's what you want. Especially because, as it has been mentioned here, there's not only opportunities of you, you know, after you graduate from your undergraduate degree major in economics, but if you were to pursue, let's say, a master's or a PhD in economics, there are other career opportunities with other earning potentials, okay, that you can be facing upon graduation. And then as part of my advising, I will be talking about what kind of suggested courses, Okay, and then very importantly, strategies of how to get those letters that Keith was mentioning. He just brought a couple. Those are really important to get. So talk to me about that, and generally information about the application admission process. All right, so that's my email. Just contact me. More than happy to talk to you guys about that or anything regarding our empirical training here at Emory. Thank you very much. Now I pass the torch to Melvin.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Hugo. Everything you've heard comes together in development economics, which I often tell my students is not really an economics. Development is about health and education policy. The economists and the political science come to worry about the policies and incentives to make sure it happens. So if you're interested in international and development economics, let me give you a sense of the prospects you might be looking at post-graduation. Next slide, please. So you're interested in international development. One, international economics looks at some of the stuff that Keith Robinson was talking to you about, transfer pricing. When you do development economics, you begin to worry about illicit financial flows, about secrecy jurisdictions, about who's taking money from where and taking it where. So you could actually become a sleuth, an investigator, a developmental economist, and a politician, a policymaker. It's a very interesting dynamics, and which is why I have the photography about Bitcoin, about gold bullion, get to hear about it, about secrecy jurisdictions overseas where people hide money, and why countries sometimes don't develop, including developing countries, what happens to their spending. Because of these things, next slide, please. Okay, you have international development agencies. Most of you think about economics, and you think about private sector, but you don't think about all these international employers of labor. Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, Mo Ibrahim, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, IDRC. Some of you here are not Americans. Some of you are international students. Some of you are Americans who would like to work in other countries. John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. You may be the representative in Latin America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia. John Templeton Foundation. A lot of you hear about Nobel Prize, but you actually never hear about Templeton. The Templeton Prize is actually higher than the Nobel Prize. Okay, so Templeton Foundation is very big. Hewlett-Packard, both Hewlett and Packard Foundation, Global Fund for Women, Open Society Foundation, and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, which is a German foundation as well. Next. So if you don't want to work for international development agencies, next slide, please. You can consider the intelligence community. You can work for CIA with a degree in economics, for Mossad, for the German intelligence agency, depending on your country of origin, for MI6, for the Brazilian intelligence agency, and most of other countries of the world. Intelligence agencies are not just people in trench coats walking around the streets and trying to spy on people. Data analysis, you just heard about Python. They hire you to crunch those data to understand how, because the war these days is not gunboat, it's about commerce, it's about trading, it's about finance. Very often you hear about countries imposing sanctions on one country because they're not compliant with the international community. Sometimes you sit at embassies in your countries trying to make sure that you're playing the same game and sitting on the side of the angels in the international community. Your degree in economics places you in a good stead to be able to perform these functions that most people never think about. And if you don't like the intelligence community, you can work for Victoria's Secret. You could be a purchasing agent. It's also part of the intelligence. You could do market intelligence. So economics gives you boundless opportunities. Next, please. Well, this is the archetypical of international agencies. You could work for Bretton Woods Institution, meaning the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund. You've already heard about those. Or you can work for the WTO, the World Trading Organization. either as a diplomat in your own right or as a representative of your country. Or you could be interested in human rights and find yourself doing legislative analysis and research for the International Criminal Court of Justice at The Hague. These are opportunities that people never consider when they think about economics. Next, please. And the archetypical, of course, is the United Nations itself. The United Nations is a very complex organization. It's one of the largest employers of labor in the world, and a lot of the people there are from multidisciplinary organizations. In fact, everything we've talked to you this evening about economics is about multidisciplinarity, whether it comes from health or from micro or from macro or from consulting or from business. Okay, so you could work at the General Assembly advising your country. In fact, the US permanent representative to the United Nations is opposite the #1 plaza, which is the UN building over there. You could have a job doing the analysis, or you could be a staff at the Security Council, or the Economic and Social Council, which is ECOSOC, or the UN Secretariat itself. Or you could work in the many specialized agencies and regional commissions, which I'm going to take you through now. Next, please. This is one of my favorite pictures. If you walk into the UN Plaza, you would see this. This means to silence the guns, to stop the conflict. Who would have thought that development economics looks at issues like this that touch you at your very heart? Okay, next. And some of the programs and funds you already know. UNICEF, for instance, United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, or the United Nations Population Fund, if you're interested in population demographics, in reproductive health, and in increases in standards of living. You saw the map, the graph that was shown to you by Ian McCarthy about the correlation between life expectancy and GDP. These are some of the things you worry about, and education at UNEFPA, the United Nations Population Agency. Or you can work for the more popular ones like the UNDP or the UNEP, if you care about the environment, or the International Trade Commission, or the Wildlife, or the World Food Program, or the United Nations Commissioner for Human Refugees, or the UNCTAD, which is about trade, or even the UN Relief and Work Agencies for the Palestine. So there's so much that you can do with your degree. Next, please. It continues, it's a whole bunch, so I'm going to leave that for you next. Thank you. This is the International Trade Commission of the UN, and they do a lot of things, including agriculture and helping countries get accepted into the World Trading Organization. They help you prepare for trade negotiations. I remember in graduate school when Keith Robinson was there, he was very good with game theory. So those kinds of strategic transfer pricing and strategic bargaining and negotiations, you can acquire those skills in microeconomics, and you could get a fabulous job at the WTO doing trade negotiations. Okay. Or as we said with your Python and big data analysis, you could be advising some of the rich countries about their trade negotiations and international business. Again, the kind of thing that Keith Robinson does. Okay, and very recently, Pamela Cook Hamilton had actually been appointed as the executive director of the ITC since October 2020. So the sky, again, is the limit when it comes to this. Okay, next. These are some of the examples of what the ITC does if you're interested in climate, and the UN gets involved in these real human issues if you care about people. Next. Same thing here. This is about trading. The case study that they do at the International Trade Center helps women in Central American countries reach the market so that the fair trade, the kind of things we talk about with Starbucks, they can get value for their money and their production. Because of the structure of the international economic system, people have begun to understand that along the value chain, the people at the upstream who actually do the manufacturing, the production sometimes don't get enough of what they produce, and that the middle persons in the midstream and the downstream try to extract a lot of the surplus. So there's been a lot of movement to see that there's fair trade along that, the distributive trade, the entire value chain. These are some of the things we worry about in international economics and development. This is a Colombian snack company that somebody that grows those coffee that makes sure you get good value for their coconuts. Next. What about the embassy? If you're interested in the exotic posting, you could be a trade attaché at the embassy of your country. You could work in multinational corporations, which we've talked about, in the extractive industries and worry about their corporate social responsibility with your degree in economics. Governance of global commons, we've talked about that. Brookings Institution, we've had them talk about it. Peterson Institute for International Economics, Human Rights Watch, Transparency International, United Nations Commission Against Corruption, the OECD, United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. So if you don't like the kind of thing that Justice Department worries about, RICO, you actually study that in development economics, because these are some of the things that keeps poor countries poor because of the way in which their resources are being extracted. The extractive industries, Transparency International, and our own US aid, if you're interested in US Agency for International Development. These are potential employees for you if you take a course in development economics. And the best part of it is you get to tour. Next slide. This is the WTO building in Geneva, very classy. You get to work in places like that. Next. This is ECLAC. This is Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Santiago, Chile. I've been here, we did some global collaboration project between Latin America, Africa, Turkey, and Soviet Union. And it was coordinated by the United Nations. So we actually had to travel to Chile to make the presentation. So you get to live glamorous life if you get to specialize in the next. This is again, development in transition. This was again in Santiago, Chile. And it was a coordination between the United Nations, ECLAC, the European Commission, and the government of Chile. And this was a development week in October 2018. Next. This is the impressive building of the UN in Vienna. So if you don't want to stay in New York, you can live in Vienna. Next. And this is their building, the United Nations in Switzerland. Next. All these are at your beck and call in international development at Emory. So why don't you think seriously about Emory economics? And if you have questions, I'll take that later. Thank you very much.
All right, hello there. My name is Katie. I'm a part of the ESS, the Economic Student Society. So my major is economics and math, and I'm also doing a concentration in ISOM in the business school, so I can give you both perspectives. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so here are some ways you can get involved with the Econ Student Society. First, we post a lot of internship and networking opportunities. Additionally, if you declare your major, Elizabeth will also be forwarding you a lot of information about the Econ major, other opportunities you can get, etc. And you can also attend some panels and events that we host. So past events have included coffee chats with professors. So we invite one professor to speak, and then back when we were in person, we would have coffee, but that's we can't really do that now. We've also hosted senior panels, so you can hear perspectives from seniors about their past experiences at Emory, but then also what they're looking to do in the future. And additionally, we just had our healthcare politics panel. So basically it shows you that we can touch on a lot of different aspects within Econ through the different events that we host. So in the future, we are hoping to have more coffee chats. And then in addition, we might want to partner with clubs such as like UNICEF Emory, and to have panelists speak about development economics and issues affecting less developed countries. And so finally, we have an alumni panel event happening on Thursday. So if you are free around 7 p.m. Eastern time, please feel free to stop by then. We'll have many speakers who are alumni of Emory. They're in different fields such as law, healthcare, finance. So it really shows you the breadth of fields that you can go to after Emory. Yeah, thank you.
Katie, can you do me a favor and take the link to the RSVP for your upcoming event and drop it in the chat, so that way if anybody is interested that they can RSVP.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome. All right, so my name is Elizabeth. As I was introduced previously, I am the interim program coordinator for the economics program. I have another role in the department. We have a fantastic new program coordinator starting, and eventually you'll hear about the transition, but we'll really be working together to make sure that everything is very seamless and that students get all the information that they need. So moving forward, how to be successful as an economics major. I think the first and foremost important point to bring up is to stay in touch, to ask questions. If you have any, utilize your faculty advisors, utilize the program coordinator. We are here to help you if there are things that you want to know. And I know that many of you are freshmen, so as first semester freshmen that you can't declare the major right this second, but I would encourage you next semester as soon as possible in spring to declare the major or minor as soon as possible. I know that for some people it feels like a very big decision or a commitment, but it enables you to get assigned a faculty advisor. It enables you to get on our mailing list and really be a part of our academic community. And if you change your mind at some point and you decide that economics is not the path for you, at least you have been a part of an academic community, and then you can transition to another community in the event that this doesn't work out for you. But majors are really the ones who are in the know about events that are going on. As Katie mentioned, I email you several times a week with interesting opportunities that I hear about, extracurricular activities. I have a lot of times alumni from the Econ department looking for other Econ students to come work at their organizations. So it's really critical to get on that mailing list and making sure that you're hearing about these things earlier rather than later. Another piece of advice, if you haven't yet done so, would be to connect with the Career Center and register for Handshake. So the Career Center, even though we're in a virtual environment, has consistent appointments that you can schedule, and just making sure that like your resume, that your cover letters are on point and that they're pristine. And then utilizing Handshake. All of the exciting events such as employer information sessions are located in Handshake. So making sure that you're registered, that you're familiar, that your settings are appropriate, and that you're checking it. I mean, these are employers who are coming to Emory specifically to speak to Emory students. So they're already excited to meet you. Just a matter of making sure that you are putting forth the effort to connect with them. And so Katie was kind enough to cover Economic Student Society, which is our largest student group, but I just want to mention other ways that students can get involved within our academic community. We have the Emory Economics Review, which is an offshoot of the Economic Student Society, and they publish a magazine of articles. So you can have the opportunity to write for the Emory Economics Review or be on the board that helps assemble those materials and edit them and publish them. It's a great new opportunity, and I believe that they started last year in 2019. So it's also a fairly new way for you to be able to participate in the major. And lastly, we have the Omicron Delta Epsilon Honor Society. So this is ODE, and even though we've had a chapter of ODE at Emory for a while, this year we've really mobilized to make it more active. We have our first annual, or for our inaugural executive board, so a committee of 5 members who is responsible for planning activities for this group. We require at least a 3.7 GPA in your classes overall, and then 4 econ classes completed. So we do a screening for that every single semester. So again, another opportunity that you would need to be a major for in order to receive an invitation to do so. I noticed that on our agenda, I wanted to point out that we had a space for Dr. Kelly Lanier to present about behavioral economics. She wasn't able to make the presentation this evening, but we will have her record her portion of it and send it out when we send out the recording for this session. So with that said, We are now opening it up for Q&A. So if you want to use the chat feature and submit any questions that you have, my colleagues and I will be here to address some of the questions that you thought of throughout our presentation. So I guess I will go ahead and let a few minutes for those questions to roll in. And in the meantime, there are some questions that obviously are very specific to an individual situation that sharing in this forum wouldn't be appropriate. But if you do have additional questions or concerns, please contact us at econungrad@emory.edu. That is our email address for our undergraduate program coordinator, and we're happy to talk through any questions that you might have about class selection or scheduling, or anything that we want to bounce off of us. And even if we don't have the answer to the question, we are happy to refer you to one of our faculty colleagues who may be able to help you. So with that said, are there any questions that you have for our faculty panelists who were so kind to share with us this evening? I want to thank all of them and Katie for being able to attend and giving her time. So I'll allow a couple more minutes for questions to come in, and in the event that we don't have any, then I am happy to end the session a little bit early.
Elizabeth, while questions are coming in, I just wanted to mention that the economics major and the joint majors with economics and other fields, they're now STEM. They're classified as STEM, which is very important for our international students. So maybe you want to follow up on that.
The only caveat to that is that the Econ Human Health joint major is not STEM designated. But the idea is that many of the students that will pursue that major would be going on to an advanced degree immediately after they're done at Emory, whether that be a master's of public health, a law degree, or some type of medical degree.
Right, but the straight economics major is now STEM.
And the Econ Math BA.
And Econ Math, right.
Also, if you're interested in health specifically, on the 18th, we're going to have a panel with Econ alumni who obviously they started in Econ and we didn't have a joint major back then, but now their careers have blossomed and they work in health. So we have a very interesting panel of experts. So again, if you think that is a career path that you're really interested in, please let me know. And I'd be happy to provide you with an invitation.
And I'd also mention that we're pretty advanced in the process of getting a new joint major in economics and computer science approved. We've already made the proposal and gotten comments on it from the university's Educational Policy Committee, and we are working on addressing the issues, and then we'll resubmit the proposal. And there's a good chance that next year that a new joint major in economics and computer science will be available. So that's very exciting news.
And we're also keeping our fingers crossed that our 4+1 program gets approved for next year. That's kind of a bigger process that it has to go through, a little bit more extensive, but if it was available for approval next year, then students who are current sophomores would be able to apply for that program. So you would apply within your junior year. There was a question, Katie, if you can address this question: how can a student connect with the Economic Student Society, and is there some type of mailing list?
I don't think we have a mailing list necessarily, but we do have many different events. So you can always just sign up for those. And I think that's how you can best get connected with ESS. So
basically, if you declare the major, then you all will send events for us to distribute.
Yeah.
Also, they have a Facebook group. And also we have, as a department, a Facebook group and a Facebook page and a Twitter account and a LinkedIn profile. So there are other ways too on connecting on social media to stay in touch and remain updated on special events. Anything else from our participants? How is the recruiting for finance comparing to B school? Katie, would you want to take that one? Maybe from a student perspective?
I'm not too sure because recruiting looks pretty different this semester, since like most companies are doing it like virtually. So I don't know if I can really speak too much about that. If you do go to the business school, there is a course they make you take that forces you to get internships, like apply for them. So that is a thing, but I'm not too sure like how it kind of like compares. So.
I mean, on the college side, we don't have those specific elements built into the curriculum, but our Emory Career Center is robust and has a lot of opportunities as well. And students are landing internships left and right that are econ majors, but it's just a matter of you seeking them out and applying for them. But all the resources are there to support you in doing that.
So Elizabeth, let me add that like most recruiting actually for companies is pretty much going virtual all the time, right? Like everything's a virtual. They may still have, I know Emory has a career fair, for example, right? Companies come, whether that's the business school or for the college, and that's less of an in-person recruiting event and more of an informational kind of idea, taking advantage right of the scale or the scope economies, I guess, associated with getting everyone in the same place. But for the actual recruiting itself, most of it is online based, one meaning that you'll apply for the jobs online through a portal, and then it'll get directed to wherever it might be, right? So large firms like PwC or any of the large consulting firms, it would go in, you would direct a preferential city or something like that, and then it would get kind of routed in that area. We would then look at the resumes that come in. By the way, this is the same whether it's an internship or for new analyst positions. We would look at those, and then we would select generally for every opening about 4 people to interview for those openings, whether or not those are internships or positions. And nowadays, if you will, that depending on you may only have 1 round or 2 round of interviews, and then offers go out. You may never visit the office location, by the way. So at our firm, we send out offers. If you get offered a job, you then also receive an invitation to come to the office to then visit with everyone in the office. Go to lunch, talk to people, ask more questions. Obviously, you could then turn down your offer. You could decide, I don't know, you don't like us or something. That's fine, nothing personal, and it's done that way. So whether it's really economics or in the business school, whether it's economics majors or business school majors, most of it's exactly the same. All the jobs are open for, whatever the preferential degrees are. There'll be certain jobs, obviously, that if an MBA is required, right, then then that's the people who they're interviewing for. But most undergraduate jobs coming out, unless it's something that's purely business oriented, for example, an accounting job where you need to be an accountant, then obviously that'd be a little different. But if it's finance related as a general rule, whether it's economics or finance, it's the same group of people going after those jobs. It's just a matter of in my opinion, how well are you at communicating, one, your enthusiasm for the job and the work that's done, as well as asking the right questions of the people doing the interviewing to make sure that company's also right for you, right? It's a job and it might pay money, but I'll say not if it sucks the soul out of you. So let's just make sure that when you're a few years down the road, when when the students are looking for jobs, that they're actually picking the place that's actually right for them as well. So it needs to be a two-way street.
Thank you, Keith, for that perspective from somebody who actively hires people.
Put out 2 offers last week, actually. So there are people still, there are still people interviewing, and there are jobs out there. As a matter of fact, one of the people already turned us down. So, so there. But I will say, if as you go through and you're looking for internships, depending on where you know, a lot of people, they'll do their offers from their internships. But it depends on really the firm. I mean, so a lot of times it's the internship you may have your, you know, call it your junior year, that may be more relevant, but that doesn't mean that whether it's a freshman, sophomore year after each one, all those internships I think are important for just the experience of working with a group of people in a team environment, and illustrating that, you know, you have good, effective communication skills. Your written skills, you know, will just come along with the experience in the job.
Do we have any other student questions? I know it's a lot of information that we threw at you at once, so I appreciate you hanging in there, taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this event. I know many of you are located in some different time zones in the Eastern time zone, so it's a bit of a sacrifice to participate in anything that's outside of just your classes, but otherwise we have recorded this presentation, so you can expect to receive an email with the link, so you can kind of fast forward, pause, stop, re-listen to things that make sense to you. And like we stated before, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And we look forward to hopefully meeting all of you as econ majors or minors sometime in the future. So thank you again for your participation, and I hope you have a great night and a great rest of the semester.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.